Oh, hello, everybody, and welcome to Conscious Conversion, a weekly podcast about how we bridge the gap between business and spirit, money and meaning, technology and regeneration in a wildly changing world. In a time of so much polarity and uncertainty, this podcast explores how together we are connecting across the planet, across our differences, and across dimensions as we build the new earth together. I am Sarah Yamtich, and I am your host and guide here at Conscious Conversion. And I am really, really honored and delighted to introduce to y'all who don't already know him, Darren Austin Hall, who I met last year at the Visionaries Immersion here in Costa Rica, in Nosara. We met in line to get cacao, and I had no idea who you were. And then later, I think the next morning, you invited me to come to your sound healing workshop. And I came and I brought my 6-year-old son. And I absolutely loved how you showed up, the power and strength and the energy that you held. And it was just really lovely. And so upon arrival back to my home in Puerto, I looked you up on Spotify, as you mentioned at the end of your workshop. And I just fell so in love with what you're creating and what you're doing. And really, that's my only exposure to you, is what I've found on Spotify and how you show up on social media. But your words and your music just sort of coat my cells in the morning. I have a morning practice of listening to music and meditations and dancing and moving. And I've been opening with one of your meditations almost every morning. So thank you for that contribution to my life. I really appreciate it. And I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself, and you can give the more official bio if you'd like.
Well, thanks, Sarah. I'm so happy that you, for one, connect to some of the work that I've put out there. I love creating. I love creating a lot of different shapes and forms of things. I'm Gemini, so it's always about just multidimensionality and being multidynamic. So yeah, basically I consider myself, foremost, people I think know me for my sound healing music and also for my spiritual teachings. And I also consider myself a storyteller. I've been doing a lot of work studying mythology and ancient wisdom and trying to reconnect to the ancient wisdom of particularly ancient Europe and the story of Gaia Sophia, and really trying to bring people back into connection of Mother Earth as in sacred relationship. I truly feel that the biggest problem on the planet still is that we have a very fractured relationship with the planet itself or herself. And so a lot of my work is now shifting into contextualizing the music and the wisdom that I'm sharing in this purpose of eco-spirituality and sort of revitalizing the idea of the mystery schools as well, which were these like holistic centers of learning, true Renaissance centers in the ancient world that really initiated human beings into true maturity and true holistic learning, which is very different than the specializations that we see today.
Yeah, thank you so much. So my next question was around like, what is your purpose? What do you feel is your soul's purpose on the planet right now in this incarnation? And I think you probably spoke to a little bit, and if I can venture to say, it's about sort of waking up that connection with the heart of Mother Earth. Is that about it? Or what would you say is your soul's purpose right
absolutely.
now? Yeah.
Yeah,
I totally feel that.
I just finished teaching my source resonance training, and it's very interesting. Whenever I teach one of my intensives, I have this sort of feeling that I'm initiating people into almost this new Earth mythology, and I always joke. I was joking with my assistant, like, who I also feel is in this kind of. We both felt like we're from the future in a way, It's like we're from the future, and we kind of know the trajectory of where we're going to go, and we have a sense of it and a very feeling, intuitive idea of it. And whenever I'm working with groups of people, I find I'm in this very spontaneous way of just guiding people through transformations. And so I'm definitely feeling like the call to be kind of in a mode of like healing consciousness is a huge part of my purpose. Like I really feel human consciousness itself has been really twisted and really distorted for thousands of years. I'm an ardent student of history, and in shamanism we call it like stalking the wound. I've been like really stalking the wounds of humanity and trying to figure out the alchemy of transforming them into wisdom. So I really see myself as a teacher as well, because I feel that education is so key in this shift that we're going through right now, that there's so much we've been miseducated upon. And I draw a lot of inspiration actually from Hermann Hesse, who's this amazing writer that I adore. And he wrote Siddhartha. A lot of people know him for that book. He was alive in like the early to mid 20th century. But his final book, The Glaspie Game, is this fantasy book about like how in the future, maybe the 23rd century, there's a whole continent on the planet that's devoted to free education of humanity, because we finally realize as a species that we just are in a crisis of consciousness. And I really, really adore this idea. And I really feel that was almost one of the reasons that I moved, to Costa Rica was I really feel this is a country, a nation, where a lot of these centers are popping up to really re-educate humanity into ancient and pioneering wisdom.
You're touching on something that I think is so interesting, and that is that we really are working with this ancient shamanic, pre our understanding of history, practices, and it's also extremely futuristic, and it's leveraging technology. And the ancient is very technologically advanced. If you study that, if you look at the pyramids and you look at what was done using sound and vibration, and then we look at modern technology and how that can be leveraged, the internet, computers, and to find ways to leverage modern technology to bring us back, to bring us into that more shamanic, ancient way of being. And being from the future might be the same as being from the past, and what is time, and oh my God. It gets really, really fun. What's that?
Good point. Yeah, good point. Past, future, who knows? Time's very illusory in some ways.
It is. I mean, it's even fun to think about how everything's happening all at once, technically. I don't actually know enough about quantum science, but I think in some sense, everything is sort of happening simultaneously, and it's just a matter of our sensory perception slowing it down so much. So when you think about it that way, and then past lives are concurrent parallel lives, and if you're coming from the past, you're coming from the future, and it's just a matter of tapping into the wisdom of those other parallel selves. And so it sounds to me, or it looks to me, or it feels to me like you're tapped into a higher version of yourself, whether it's from the future or the past or the present. You're tapped into something that is aligned with source and the heart of the earth.
Hopefully. I think oftentimes...
maybe not 100% of the
time. When I'm teaching and when I'm making music, I definitely feel, especially with the music, because a lot of the music that I make is, I consider it, and this is only something that I've really started to call it in the last recent years, actually, is more like song channeling. And a lot of that was defined for me from studying, the ancient perceptions on music from our ancestors. And music was actually always seen as kind of this channel that we were bringing through. We were simply just plugging into the harmonies of the universe itself in all its incredible intricate design and order, but also plunging ourselves into all this multiverse of different dimensions where there are many life forms of spirit, ancestor spirit, angelic realms, whatever you want to call it, who can then be invited into the musician, who then becomes sort of a conduit and an instrument for this divine connection. And this is very much how a lot of music was seen to be evoked by the ancients. It's only been in the last couple hundred years, with, of course, the rise of capitalism, that everything's sort of been compartmentalized into like being a product. So music then became very shaped into just mostly being for entertainment. But there's this deeper part of it, and I love initiating people into that, because I do feel, accessing our higher self is about enthusing, the sails of our soul, I like to call it. It's like, how do we blow some wind into the sails of our heart? How do we get into like, a more activated vibration? And to me, one of the surest ways is to tone with the voice, is to sound, is to make music. Even better if you can do it in a community and create music together, then it becomes really, really profound when, you have a group of people making sound and music together. I call it, you're really practicing oneness at that point, because people can really merge into like the frequencies and become this one organism of sound. That kind of stuff is very interesting. And I feel like I'll be experimenting with sound and music as a spiritual art for the rest of my life. It's definitely one of the greatest joys for me. And just coming out of the intensive I just taught, it's when you get to take people through a very deep experience of that, it's really profound. And I also just wanted to speak to what you said about quantum physics, because I don't think the quantum physicists even know what's going on. And I think that's the beauty of quantum physics, is like we broke open the atom, and then it's like, what is this world? And those dimensions are so... And that's why, I appreciate the ancients. They had the mystery schools. A lot of Native Americans regard it as the great mystery. And that's where, play becomes more invited, because you get to this place where truth is not really certain as much as like more mechanistic scientists or materialist scientists would want it to be. And that's where, for me, it gets into a very liberating space. Because then it's something like, oh, we can actually know truth together in so many different ways, and it doesn't have to be something concrete. It can be ever-changing. It can be amorphous. And that sense of play gets reinvited into our lives. And that's, like, to me, deeply inherent in some of the deepest mystical traditions, this idea of play.
Yeah, you said a few things that really inspired more conversation. So it's hard to pinpoint which one to land on. But I'll just go. Oh no! I love it. I love it. It's my favorite. I think my Mercury is in Gemini, which means that I can handle communicating in multiple different planes at the same time, and having 15 concurrent topics.
Excellent.
But so. One of them I loved, I'll just let that one, pick on that one, is I love the concept of us being an instrument of source. And, and I also, it's like this fractalization, right? Because we have our instruments that we play, the singing bowl, the flute, the guitar, whatever, that's our instrument. But then we can take that as a metaphor that we are the instrument of Gaia or of source or the cosmos or whatever it is, you want to call it the universe or God. That we are that instrument, and if we can just get out of the way and be played. And for me, sometimes it's music, and sometimes it's dancing and movement, and sometimes it's conversation that gets channeled, and sometimes it's sex, and sometimes, it's all sorts of different things that are channeled through you through this instrument. And I just, I love that concept, because it helps me sort of experientialize that when I think about it as a metaphor for an actual instrument. The other thing that you recently said was about mystery and the mystery schools. And I remember it was before 2020. It was a few years ago. I was having my own awakening moments, as happened perpetually, and thinking and talking to my mentor, one of them, Munai. She's currently in Maui. Hi, Munai. I was talking to her about how I felt this deep unfolding mystery that just was like really, really starting to come up for me. Like, wow, I am an integral part of an unfolding mystery that's happening right now. And it is so fun and exciting and crazy. And I have no idea what's about to happen. And I've come to understand more and more that that's the purpose of being on this planet. That's the purpose of being here, is to have wonder at and awe at everything around us. And the more we seek truth, the more we uncover the mystery, and more that we see that actually we don't know anything at all. The more we know, the more we don't know, and the more fun it is, because then there's more to uncover. And yeah, I think that's all. I really agree with that the sense of play and being played is, it's a lot of fun. It can be a lot of fun if you can tap into that, no matter what's happening around you. If you can tap into that awareness, then life is fun.
Yeah, I think it's a big paradigm shift that's happening, because to me, to have a relationship with mystery, or even to take a step further and like really dance with it and like be mysterious, it does entail, trust on a deep level of the process of life. And I think this is one of the deep things that's being healed right now in our humanity. Like, I do believe that we're living in a time of, we are fulfilling a lot of prophecy right now. And a lot of universal, like planetary healing is taking place in our species, just human consciousness on the most grandest scale. And I think one of the nodes of healing that's very important that's happening right now is we're healing this trust again, that we can trust the universe, that we can trust the world, that we can trust the human soul. Because, if you look at religion, and particularly what created Western civilization, it came from a lot of religiosities that really told us the opposite, that said, you are originally flawed, and this paradise that is Earth is actually went through some event where it became a fallen paradise, and you can't trust nature. I mean, when you study some of the founders of science, empirical science, like Francis Bacon, for example, and I write a lot about this. I have a new blog on my website called Sophia's Smile, Restoring a Sense of the Goddess that is Earth. And, I do a lot of critique of and just illuminating sort of the belief systems that are behind a lot of the things that we take, for granted, like science, for example. And if you look at like Francis Bacon, who created the scientific method that is considered the golden standard of discerning truth, there's this quote where he basically says, like, let us put nature on the rack, which is this like torture device, and rape her for all her secrets. Like, that's literally the attitude he was bringing into this like methodology of knowing about the world. And to me, we really need to like look into that. Like, so science is sort of based on this like antipathy for nature, this arrogance, this hubris, which I think is all being exposed right now on the world stage. I feel like 2020 was like the universe just like thrust this giant hand to humanity and said, here's a cup of ayahuasca, and we all drank it, and it was just like the pandemic was like the Trojan horse. And I feel like we've just been going through this spin cycle of all these truths being exposed. And I think one of the things that's really shaking the world right now is like, and I did a Wisdom Warrior chat on my YouTube channel on this, which was called How to Know Truth in a Post-Truth World. Because science as a worldview is really being shaken right now. Like, medical science is just showing itself to be imperfect, which is fine. I mean, we're all imperfectly perfect. But the problem is our world has been set up with science kind of holding this like infallible truth about the world. And that's just not the case anymore. And I think that's why there's a lot of consternation and anxiety in the collective right now, because people are like, oh my God, like, what is true? Nothing, I don't even know anymore. Which is, the dark night of the soul, until, you find the exact dance party and you sip some cacao and you find the like-minded people who are like, just flow. Like, let's just flow with it. So, dancing.
Thank
still
God
all
for
over the
those
place.
parties.
Like it's this coconut coffee I've drank this morning.
Thank God for those parties.
Truly, right? Like I do feel like a lot of humanity is being saved on ecstatic dance floors, and sound journeys and plant medicine experiences. Like all these different things are offering. I mean, there's just so much healing taking place. It's like amazing. I kind of feel like the powers that were really trying to control humanity and really create a war on our consciousness, they're just besieged right now by so many forces that are here to like heal and enlighten humanity. And I just think we're in such a fortuitous position, even though we're also in, there's so much suffering going on at the same time. It's like we have to hold all of it, which is super intense.
And we're back. Darren had a little blip in the internet because Costa Rica. And also he teleported. That's actually what happened. He teleported to a place with an even stronger connection.
Astral turbulence.
Here we have a stronger Wi-Fi connection, but we also have a stronger connection to a river. So we've got some beautiful nature background sounds, as we often do, and we love it. So before you were disconnected, you were talking about how the collective has willfully or unknowingly taken a big old shot of ayahuasca. And we all know that those of us that have participated in ayahuasca ceremony, that there's often a lot of dark night of the soul, sort of eternal facing of one's shadows, all the stuff that happens when you take that drink. And so I think that's about where you cut off. And I don't know if you had more to share there.
There's always more to share, Sarah, when you're talking to a Gemini. I could definitely jump into it. I mean, it's funny. I remember when I wrote that metaphor last year, people loved it. And I don't think I was the only person saying that. I think that was something in the collective field. But I remember I added this nuance where I said, and it might need some, illumination for those who haven't drank ayahuasca, but it was kind of like, it feels like we just drank ayahuasca and we're like in the first hour, which is when, there's about a half-hour buffer when you drink ayahuasca where, you're just waiting. You're waiting for the grandmother's spirit to start uncoiling and start to flow, through you. And you go through this kind of transfiguration. The veils start to slowly pull down. Typically people start to have some little visuals of like sacred geometry, and then it's like the gulp moment, like, oh my God, like what's happening? And I kind of felt like, we were in that first hour where it was just kind of like, whoa, the world is not what it used to be. And that's usually when the most fear hits. And, fear is, this movie Dune, which is so great. They did this remake of Dune. I don't know if you've
I haven't seen it yet. No.
Oh, it's such an amazing remake. I mean, I was a huge fan of the books, so to see someone do great service to the books is amazing. And, there's this key thing in this book, which is very shamanic. There's this Ben Gesserit, these witches who are, initiating humans into all these great spiritual powers in the universe. And they always talk about fear being the mind killer. And I think we saw that in 2020. There was so much fear in the world, and it was like that first hour of ayahuasca, and no one really had their bearings. There was just a lot of like cathartic moments on social media, people just like vomiting out their fear, yelling at each other, divisiveness. And I feel like 2021 was like maybe like the second hour where, you start to like work with the medicine a little. You're kind of like, okay, I'm here, like I'm getting it. And now it feels like we're really starting to step forward a bit into like, I've been shifted, and now how am I going to walk in this new form that I have? And it's a very tender space to be in, but it does feel that through that adversity, through any adversity you go through in life, one of my favorite quotes is Shakespeare's, "Sweet are the uses of adversity." And you really feel this amazing, sorry, a cat just like gobbled up a huge rat. It's a sign, it's a metaphor. Costa Rica, it's all jungle here. But, sweet are the uses of adversity. And I feel that when we, and again, this is part of the like reconfiguration of ideas, because I think we're taught a lot to like be comfortable with life and to kind of find safe spaces. But I think most of us who are on a deep path, we know like, no, I need challenge to activate me. I seek challenge at a certain point when you realize like, it's not there to get you. Adversity isn't out to get you. The universe is just wanting you to like step further into your power, and it's giving you this perpetual tough love. So I feel like now people are like, I'm seeing a lot of boldness. I'm seeing a lot of empowered humans who have sort of like faced down this harrowing journey that we've been on the last 2 years especially, but even previous to that. I mean, we've just been on this deep harrowing journey since, especially the environmental crisis, waking up to the fact like we've literally destroyed our home planet, reckoning with our insanity on that level. It's the universe is saying to us like, you guys really got to step up, and the glory that's on the other side of that challenge is substantial and joyous and amazing. And I think part of my work is just getting more people through my own, life, because we can only teach what we do, what we know from our living, and just to live more in that glorious potential that we can now create a new world, and that's, I think, what's being asked of us and why we're being jostled into our sovereignty. Because it's like, we're not going to be able to do it from a place of disempowerment. We've got to really step into our full power.
Well, and this is, I think, why we have our own individual dark nights of the soul, those moments where the rug got pulled out from underneath you, and you can easily go into victim mode, and maybe you indulge that for a minute where it's like, holy shit, what just happened? My partner just decided to cheat on me, or I lost my job, or something really destabilizing happens. And it's just like, why the fuck is this happening right now? And then you realize that that moment where you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and where you say, I have the power here. Whatever strategies I have or methods I have to step into my own power would have never happened if that rug hadn't been pulled out from under me and if I had stayed complacent in the situation that I was in. And when you aren't necessarily listening to like the small little whispers of the universe or of your angelic, self, when you won't listen to the whispers, sometimes they got to turn up the volume. And so I feel like, that's kind of what's happened on the collective too. It's like, okay, so you weren't really listening when we were just kind of like letting you know gently and lovingly. So now we're just going to have to pull out the big guns and help yourself.
I've used the metaphor a lot of like, it's like we're in a wrestling match with the greatest wrestler in the cosmos, and it's just putting us into another move, It's like, are you tapping out? No? Okay. How about this? No? Oh, okay. How about this like crazy figure four? No? Okay. And until we finally are like, okay, enough. Okay, I'll do it. I'll change. I'll transform.
Right.
I'm on the path of evolution.
Amazing. So talking about sort of like creating a new world or a new earth or a new paradigm that we're ushering in. How will we know when we got there? Are we already there? Is it just a matter of perception? Is it a real thing that happens on this, terrestrial 3D realm, or is it just a state of mind? What do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so many things just fired up into my mind on that. It makes me think, for one, of have you read the Bhagavad Gita?
Not the whole thing. I've read some excerpts.
So there's an excerpt where, Krishna, the god of love in Hinduism, is teaching this warrior, Arjuna. And Arjuna's kind of saying like, why should I do anything in life? Why don't I just go up to the mountaintop, and like meditate? And Krishna's trying to teach him the karma of yoga, of like, no, you have to act in the world. You have to be in action. And he basically says the best way to act in the world is to make everything an offering. you know. And I feel, I think that that's coming to mind because I don't think I don't think there's going to be a moment when we really have a total feeling that we've like got there. I think that life is this generational thing where we're just taking the torch and we're like moving it a little further along and then we're passing it. I mean, we're definitely seeing glimmers of, for one, there's a collapse happening. There's no doubt that there's this transfiguration happening of civilization on the biggest levels. I mean, capitalism, the financial system, and it's not only just a collapse, it's then the transformation, you know, because cryptocurrency showed up like this amazing new compost that's just like mulching and changing the financial system into something else. But, you know, it could take a century or more until we finally feel like, whew, okay, we're in like now an enlightened civilization, which I think is our destiny. You know, I think we're going to get to a point in our future, hopefully nearer future, but it could take more time because, you know, the wounds are so deep. But I do think that, you know, the signs to look for, I think, is a deep return to living in rapport with the earth is going to be like one of the biggest indications, because, you know, the environmental movement, there's a certain tokenism to it where people are like, oh yeah, I did my recycling today and blah, 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 blah. And we're still stuck in this materialistic sense of the environment. Like, oh yeah, we got to save the resources, save the environment. But when you talk to the ancient, you know, people and the indigenous people are still living in those ancient wisdom paths, you know, they're like, no, we're saving our relationship with Mother Earth, who is our teacher. You know, she's our wisdom teacher. If you're not in relationship with the earth in a spiritual way, in a teaching way, in a learning way, you're going to become insane. You're going to get off the path. You're going to abort out of this sacred interdependent web of life, which every other species is living in, and you're going to start to forging a path of madness. And I think when people really open their eyes and they study history, especially for the last 2,000 years, it's like, wow, we're kind of crazy. We went really, really crazy. And I think now we're in a state of returning to our sanity. So I do feel, and a lot of the work that I've just been experiencing in my own life, because I've had this blessed opportunity to work with a lot of indigenous people, and they've really cultivated in me and initiated into me this understanding like, wow, I can go and sit out in nature for just a moment, or I could even do like a much more powerful context, like a vision quest for 3 days, and I can start to receive messages from the earth. And it's not because I'm extraordinary. We all have this ability. And when you start to feel what the Taoists call that guiding realm of nature teaching and leading and guiding us, for one, it's just like a, whew, wow, we do have a mother force here that's really just wanting to take care of us on all the levels. And we just haven't leaned into that enough. And it's also just like really empowering to be able to feel that perpetual wisdom coming and bubbling up in our hearts, and then becoming of service to that reconnection of the sacred web of life. And I think that's already happening. I think personally another thing that I just like to see is more, you know, I mean, I don't think it may be a pipe dream, because I don't know if the world stage is going to be the same in a decade from now. Will we have presidents and prime ministers in the same way? But if we do, I'd love to have, you know, indigenous people, you know, leading nations, or at least being like at the forefront of guiding, you know, nations. Because there's still a lot of like tokenism with the indigenous, like we've got to help the indigenous, what we did to them is so bad, blah, blah. But it's kind of like we need to go a bit further and being like, they, you know, yes, we totally like colonized and genocided them, but they're kind of waiting for us to like just go to them and learn.
Yeah, I was going to say, the ways that we so-called help the indigenous aren't necessarily helpful. It's like when I was a kid and wanted to join the Peace Corps. It's not actually helpful in the way that you think it might be helpful. Like us giving indigenous populations reparations in the form of money so that they can then become more dependent upon the broken system isn't actually maybe long-term helpful. What's helpful is exactly, I think, what you just said, which is listening. Same with the planet, like recycling. Okay, fine, that's good, do it. But really, it's listening. And there are practices to help you tune in to that. Sound healing being one of them that is beautiful, dancing being another, breath work. There's so many different portals into being able to attune yourself to the voice of the mother, as you would say.
Tantric sex.
Tantric sex. That's a really good one. So anyway, I love that, and I love the question of like, what does government look like? Do we even have nation states at the level that we have them now, or is it more localized? Is it more sort of like more reflective of Sioux Nation and Cherokee Nation or Lakota Nation? You know, where you have sort of bands of people with their own sort of structures, and there's this sovereignty to it, you know? And
seems to be moving towards that. It feels like we're all like spores right now, growing on a very old creature that needs to be like composted and transformed. And all these communities I'm seeing popping up everywhere. I mean, it's like the zeitgeist right now. It's like, go build a community somewhere, get back to the land. Like, it's like Costa Rica itself, like we're both seeing it. I mean, there's such a profound migration of people here who have the willingness, the dreaming, and then also like the resources, thanks to, you know, the retransfer of wealth, which crypto I think is enabling in certain ways. There's like the means to do it, and that's really exciting. And I'm excited to see what's going to emerge from that, because it is a lot of people just wanting to live like outside of the system, and then create new nodes of, yeah, call it the new earth. Who knows? Especially if those nodes start to connect in deeper webs, and we start to continually challenge, you know, the human egotisms that have created such isolation from not just each other, but from us and the environment. Like I talk a lot about in my writing about the human supremacy complex. You know, everyone's talking about white supremacy and stuff, but like when you really look at, to me, the bigger problem, it's like we have this human supremacy complex. We think we're like the most supreme creature on this planet, and the patriarchal systems, the materialist systems, all these systems that are, to me, very distorted, they're all based on this really misinterpretation of what our true role is here. I don't necessarily have the answer of what that is, but I love the mystery that's occurring, again, of just the humility of like, okay, we really kind of went off the path, you know, so now we're course correcting. And, you know, Joanna Macy, who's this great eco-spiritual philosopher, now elder, she talks a lot about this too, in what she calls the great turning that we're in. She's like, you know, we have to embrace that we don't know what it's going to look like in the end. And we have to like feel the joy of that. It's like the pioneering spirit that we're going to go forward together and discover this together. And that's exciting, but it does stir the pot of, you know, the ego in us that wants security and comfort. And that's where, you know, we need to get pragmatic about like, well, what would it look like to be in a flow state in quite a lot of constancy? And that's where I feel, you know, living in community, it's like, well, you need your dance once a week. You need to come together and do your rituals. And you need a lot of time, you know, communing with the earth as a guiding spirit.
how do you see us, like, you know, so I completely agree that living more in harmony with nature, hearing her voices, listening to the trees, dancing for the trees, being in the rivers and the oceans, and just really, really opening yourself up to that. I think that's everything, and it's exciting and it's pleasurable. How do we leverage technology to do more of that, to inspire others to do more of that? Because there's this like seeming paradox, and I sort of grapple with it happily, of like, I own a digital marketing agency, where we do Facebook and Instagram and Google ads and all this other stuff and, organic social media. And it's like, I'm like, oh, but I want us all to be less on those things and more in the rivers. So
Yes.
how do you see those things sort of working together?
It's a great question, Sarah. And I think, I think it's actually, the answer can be, simple in one level. It's always coming back to the idea of this thing, balance, which is something we don't do very well. But most of the ancient traditions, Taoism, Buddhism, middle path, it's all about like, how do we find that balance? There's no absolute good, evil. There's nothing wrong inherently with technology. I think what more people are realizing now, it's the consciousness behind technology that's intended, its creation, that's the problem. And, I'm glad you mentioned social media, because I think, hey, we all use social media. We can all see the light and the dark sides of it. The light is that every single human being who uses social media now can broadcast, can share ideas, can be empowered to have their voice contributing in the world in ways that we didn't before. The dark side of that is that can compel people to be maybe narcissistic, and they can get lost in oversharing and then not receiving enough, and then just spending too much time on technology. I think that's, to me, the biggest thing with the balance is like, we need to, I think what 2020 was an opportunity to sort of integrate was that we did a lot of stopping that year. And I think what's important is that humanity needs to realize, like, we are addicts. We are dealing with a crisis of consciousness. And I think we all need to soberly, like, take that in. If you look at, like, the 10 steps of AA and the process that they go through, it is a lot about just, like, having a sober conversation with ourselves about, like, what have we really been, like, doing, I don't want to say wrong in the judgmental way, but what have we been doing that's been kind of like misinformed and destructive, and having a really like sobering take on that. And when we look at like how technology has been used, it's been primarily used to destroy the planet, to enthuse war. There's these really dark sides of tech. And then when we look at what's coming with AI and the technocracy that's being infused with like the metaverse and all of this, there's some real like, whoa, full control of human culture type scenarios that could be happening there. So in the end, what I'm trying to say is that I think I'd love to see more time stopping and people just taking time in nature. Like if I was president of the world, I'd say every human being, here's like enough money to live on, and let's like take rolling meditations for the next year, like a month for each country or something, where you just go out to nature, you have some facilitators who take you through a bit of a guided experience, you're fed really good food, and you just allow homeostasis to happen on the level of psychology as well. Homeostasis is this miraculous thing that when you rest, your natural body starts to repair itself. And I think that's also happening on the level of our consciousness. So I'd just like to see more people, being like, okay, I was on the computer for like 2 hours. I'm going to go spend like half an hour in nature now. And just starting to recenter nature and Mother Earth in our lives as probably our primary relationship. I think that would help then bring the consciousness to technology and its creation, that would then see better technologies being informed and created, and better use of those technologies. I think we have to get to the essence, which is consciousness.
Yeah, and what you just said reminded me of something that you said earlier, which is make everything an offering. So any use of technology, anytime I pick up my phone to look or to do something on social media, anytime I'm having a podcast interview, all of it, if it can be intentionally offered in service to the new earth, or in service to Gaia, or to the planet, or to source, and listen and continue to listen, then it is my hope that will unfold naturally, that my use of technology will become that offering. in service to the planet. And then I will be more inspired as I, to go outside for half an hour after 2 hours online to go listen and to, because honestly, if I'm not doing that, then I don't know what the hell to say in these conversations. I don't know what the hell to say on social media. Like if I'm not listening to Mother Earth tell me sort of like to open up my channel, then I got nothing.
100%. And I do feel that we need to do more. I think people really have to like look at the metaversing of it, and what's being really our children especially being conditioned into. We need to push back. There definitely needs to be an eco-spiritual culture that's being raised and contextualized as like one of the primary antidotes for our collective insanity, so that people can really prioritize this. This is like, I'm a very playful person, but this is also like a very serious thing. Like we have to like really have that serious conversation with ourselves. Like this is really needed. This is what the indigenous people have been like just waiting for. They're like, man, we've been dealing with your guys' madness for a long time, and waiting for you to finally like get it, and realize like, whew, we're going to continue on this crazy path until we replug into this web of life and figure out how to like really be symbiotically a part of the earth. There's no other way, because look at the CEO captains of industry. They're like, in the midst of the pandemic, they're like, let's build rocket ships and take moon rides and go to Mars. And you're just like, you're spending billions of dollars on like when Jeff Bezos, the Amazon guy, like took that moon ride, in the midst of like all the climate change stuff coming out. I mean, I hope every human being who watched that has some sense, has some reason with them, that was just like, this is not what we should be doing. Like, let's take all those, because, he was on NBC, I remember, and he's just like, I've always had this dream of just going into space, and it's like, that's cool. I also had that dream, but like climate problems and all this other stuff, maybe we wait and do that when everything else is good.
Yeah.
To me, it was just like, wow, you could see the insanity, and it's not to like overly persecute people like that, because I mean, hopefully Jeff is finding an exact dance floor somewhere, but yeah, we got some big ish to deal with right now.
We do, and I feel like those of us that do feel called to stand up and talk to the mainstream, or talk to some aspect of that, or to talk to a wider audience. If we have the wherewithal and we have that, and we do feel some sort of tapping into our, a collective awakening, then I think by all means, speak out, because the world needs more leaders right now. The world needs more people that are speaking truth, and
yes.
So I'm
speak out and live out
and live. Yeah,
I'm realizing that a lot more, because I get too much into, one of my problems with technology is like, I love to share. I'm Geminiing it up all day. Like I could just type posts all day long, but then I'll reach a point where I'm like, have I lived these truths enough today? Like, and that's where the balance needs to happen for me.
Yeah. How can people? What do you have sort of coming around the bend that people could see from you or hear from you?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that I'm excited to share is I'm going to be relaunching this amazing online learning portal called the Honor All Creation Experience. So when the pandemic hit, I won some kind of spiritual lottery, in that I was in Costa Rica, as you were. I found myself in Santa Teresa, this mecca of tourism that was then empty, with these beautiful beaches all to myself and this beautiful soul family. And I was kind of like stuck in this beautiful home right on the ocean with one of my favorite music producers, Stephen Key. And we made this double album together devoted to Mama Gaia, to eco-spirituality, like this 22 songs over 9 months, a real labor of love. And it's a concept album. Those songs are deep. Each one has like a teaching. And I ended up elaborating it into an online course. And it's going to be relaunching soon, where basically you buy in and then you have access to this teaching tree of 11 teachings for each album, so 22 on the whole, and then an intro and an outro. And each node of the song, each song chapter, has a wisdom teaching video, some spiritual philosophy text, a spiritual practice, a deep listening exercise to actually take the song itself into a deeper absorption. And it's all about, looking at these deep themes of collective healing. So that's something that'll be coming soon. And I'm going to be also relaunching my Kings of the Heart 8-week program for men, taking them through the masculine archetypes, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. We just finished the first wave and it was a huge success. And we're going to be launching as well some week-long men's retreats for Kings of the Heart as well. So we're definitely raising that as a banner, as a brand, to really take men into deeper expressions of themselves. And the last thing I'll share is that I've moved in Costa Rica to this beautiful little town called Londres, and I'm working now out of Posada Natura, one of the most beautiful retreat centers in all of Costa Rica. And we're basically incubating this Gaia Awakening Institute here, which is a 10-year dream I've been visioning of creating a eco-spiritual school where we can really start taking people into deeper relationship with the earth, and also a school that can also house my Source Resonance Academy, my sound healing trainings, and all kinds of other holistic activities. We're going to have a beautiful faculty of teachers here. We're going to be living together in community. And the idea is to expand it into eventual community that will sort of surround the education center. Because I'm really passionate about creating communities that have this like bigger purpose, around them. So our purpose is to be a community that's like really devoted to education of humanity, into eco-spirituality.
That sounds amazing. I can't wait to see it.
Me too.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. And people can find you, I know, on Instagram at Darren Druid.
Yes.
Darren
Druid.
I really enjoy your posts.
I have a YouTube channel
stories.
too. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
YouTube, okay.
Yeah, I have my YouTube channel where I do Wisdom Warrior chats. I try and do them once a week. They're like spiritual chats. I kind of take the pulse of. I love actually braiding the world, political world, the world event world with spiritual perspectives, and so those happen about once a week as well. And then I'm on Spotify. My music is there, and I have a lot of different albums.
Yeah, I highly recommend your Spotify presence. I've sent various songs to various friends many times.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, it's in service to humanity. So thank you for your work and your play and all that you do and be in the world. I really appreciate you. And it was absolutely delightful having you on Conscious Conversion. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm delighted as well. Honored to be here with you and really adore your work. So thank you.
All right. Have a beautiful day, everyone.